The wood of Alice's front door quivered as she slammed it shut behind her. She hadn't switched the lights off, and the TV screen was still mutely displaying scenes from an old detective drama. She just had to get outside, down to the sea. Sian was impossible. Nothing for weeks and then a sudden demand for money. Why had her daughter always found it so difficult to call regularly? Alice didn't believe the "my phone died" story any longer. How was it possible to adore someone at the same time as wanting to throttle them? Lucky for Sian that she was nearly 200 miles away. Who'd be a parent? Correction, who'd be a mother? Brian had contributed precisely nothing in the parenting department. And how was he passing the time while she was trying to deal with their unreliable daughter? Sipping wine, no doubt, with Janice Morgan in her elegant Victorian home in Llandaff. Oh, that's Janice Morgan, friends said when she explained that he'd left. Yes, the famous ukulele playing Janice bloody Morgan. As the bay came into view, Alice breathed in deeply and felt her body shake as it sucked in the night air. She wiped something damp from her cheeks, whether spray or tears of anger, she couldn't be sure. The sun was long gone, but it wasn't quite dark as she negotiated the familiar boulders at the top of the beach. This was her usual walk. These days she needed the crash of the waves and the thunder of the wind to relax her, to make her own problems feel small against the immensity of nature. Sian only got in touch when she wanted something. Money, usually. Tonight's demand had been the last straw, couched as it was in the implication that the marriage breakup had been Alice's own fault. The flat rocks, which Alice always imagined had been fashioned into their neat layers by some primeval stonemason, were comfortingly firm under her feet. In the evening silence a few ghostly gulls passed overhead seeking their roosts. A light tracked through the emerging stars. A satellite, perhaps. There were so many now, keeping tabs on us all. She took in a deep breath, trying to relax, and tasted the salt on her lips. Sian had been right about one thing. Alice would have to sell the house. Once the fulfilment of a shared dream, it had now become a burden. Small stones tumbled down the face of the sheer cliff to her right, a hollow clatter echoing in a lull between the waves. She didn't usually walk this close to the cliffs. Rockfalls here were common and had on occasion been fatal. For the first time in her march across the beach she paused and looked round. The outlines of the next bay were blurred by growing darkness. Distant lights blinked some way down the coast, but too far away to be of any comfort. The watching satellite was long gone. The only sounds were the boom and suck of the waves, and a plaintive last wail from a bird-haunted crack in the cliff. The stupidity of her situation spilled over her like a drenching breaker. It was almost dark, and the waves were too close. The tide was coming in, not going out. How could she have missed that? At high tide the beach was drowned, the water slopping right up against the cliffs. There was no way out. She reached into her pocket for her phone. And, as she felt the empty lining, knew in a moment of icy clarity that it was still in her handbag, in the house. The smell of seaweed filled her nostrils.
That sounded like a bad one, Jess commented when Sian came into their shared living room. Negotiations not going well? Mum's impossible, Sian said, massaging her aching head. She slumped onto the big cushion, which had been carefully positioned to hide an unidentifiable stain. She moans that I don't get in touch, and then just nags when I do. Wine? Jess held out a glass of cheap Sauvignon Blanc to her. Sian hesitated for a moment. She was still hungover from last night, and then accepted it. I haven't spoken to my parents in 6 months, Jess said, taking a sip from her own glass. We used to get on, Sian said. Mum and me, as well as anyone else anyway. But everything's rubbish now. My so-called job, this flat, not enough money, my parents separating. It's all a tangled up mess. Jess looked around. Don't diss our little palace. Bloody expensive little shithole. They were silent for a few minutes. Eventually, Jess said, Amy will be back with the pizza soon. She sounded really angry, Sian said to her glass of wine. I only said she should sell the house. It's way too big for one person. You could ask your dad for the money. He's waiting for Mum to sell the house too. He's such an idiot, going to live with that banjo-playing woman. He's made her really unhappy. Who? The banjo player? No, of course not. My mum. I think I'd better ring her back. She put the phone down on me. She never does that. Sian balanced her glass on the edge of the cracked fireplace and went into her bedroom. She tried her mother's mobile and then the landline. There was no answer on either. She left a voicemail. Mum, please ring back. I'm sorry I said it was your fault Dad left. I suppose it all just happened. I don't know. It's really none of my business. Please ring back, Mum. She tapped a few messages saying much the same thing. But the phone was silent. She rang again. Mum, you're worrying me. I know I'm useless about keeping in touch, but you always pick up. Call me back, please. The front door at street level banged in its loose, welcome all burglars kind of way. Amy, presumably, with the food. Sian put her phone back in her pocket and went out onto the landing to meet her. Amy was trudging up the last flight of steps. I hope you two appreciate me going out for supplies. Of course we do, Jess said with a laugh. You look like you've had a fight with a hedge. Thanks, Amy said, handing over the pizzas and trying to flatten her untidy curls. It's really blowy out there. As if to back her up, the wobbly window in the kitchen rattled suddenly. Sian shivered as a gust of night air wove its way through the rooms of the flat. It carried with it, weirdly, the smell of seaweed.